Welcome to our channel, English Ease, where we tell you real-life stories that don't just entertain you, they open your eyes, touch your heart, and help you improve your English at the same time. This is not just a history lesson. This is not just a biography. This is a story of power, pain, war, fear, betrayal, and the cost of control. Today, we begin the story of a man whose name still creates fear, debate, anger, and curiosity around the world. A man who rose from nothing, ruled with an iron hand, and fell in front of the whole world. A man remembered by some as a tyrant, by others as a nationalist, but by most as a symbol of absolute power gone too far. This is the story of Saddam Hussein, and what you're about to hear has never been told like this before. We're going deep, not into politics, not into opinions, but into the heart of a man's journey. From a broken childhood to a brutal rule, from a poor village to world headlines, and finally to a shocking end. Every moment you hear in this story is real. Every scene, every turning point, every lesson, it's taken from true events. But we are not here to praise or blame. We are here to understand. Because only when you understand power, fear, and pain can you understand the world around you. And while you listen to this story, something incredible will happen. You won't just learn about history, you will learn English. Real English, emotional English. English used in life, in documentaries, in serious conversations. You will feel it and you will grow. So, take a deep breath. Stay till the end, because this will be one of the most powerful stories ever told on this platform. Let's begin. Part 1, The Broken Beginning. The story of Saddam Hussein does not begin in a palace. It does not begin with power. It begins in a small, dusty village called Alja, near the city of Tari in Iraq. He was born on April 28, 1937, but his birth was not a celebration. It was surrounded by death, loss, and emotional darkness. Before Saddam was even born, his father either died or disappeared. Historians still debate what truly happened. Some say he vanished. Some say he died of cancer, but one fact is clear: he was gone. Saddam's mother, Subatulfa, was left alone, pregnant, heartbroken, and already dealing with the loss of her first son, who had died before Saddam's birth. This pain broke her emotionally. She could not handle it. She tried to give Saddam away before he was even born. She even tried to take her own life. Eventually, she gave the baby away to relatives for the first few years. Saddam spent part of his early childhood without a mother, without a father, and without love. This is where the seeds of emotional damage were planted. He was not born a villain. He was born into rejection, instability, and emotional trauma. After some years, his mother remarried. His stepfather, Hassan al-Ibrahim, was a poor, violent man. Saddam lived in fear. He was beaten often. He grew up in a household where anger was louder than kindness, where power came from fists, not words. He could not read or write properly until he was around 10. But by then, something darker had started growing inside him. A feeling of rage, a desire for respect, a dream of revenge against the world that had hurt him. At age 10, Saddam left the abusive home and went to live with his uncle, Karol Atolfa, in Baghdad. This uncle was a former army officer, a strong nationalist, and a man filled with anti-Western ideas. He hated colonialism. He hated foreign influence in Arab lands. He believed only strong men should rule, and violence was a necessary tool for control. Kayala filled Saddam's mind with books about Arab power, military glory, and ruthless leadership. He told him stories of betrayal, control, and struggle. This was Saddam's education, Not school books, but ideas of dominance, violence, and fear. He became obsessed with power. He wanted to rise not just for money, but for respect, for control, to never be weak again. Saddam started attending school in Baghdad. But he was never truly academic. He was known more for his aggression, intimidation, and violent nature. He started carrying weapons even as a student. He stabbed people. He fought often. He was feared by his classmates. He enjoyed being feared. He was not intelligent in the traditional way, but he was calculating. He was patient. He had vision, not of peace, but of control. In the late 1950s, Iraq was full of political fire. The country had a king, but there was increasing hatred for the monarchy, especially among the poor and nationalists. In this environment, Saddam joined the Ba'ath Party, a political group that believed in Arab unity, socialism, and strong leadership through force. The Ba'ath Party did not believe in waiting for change. They wanted to take it by force if necessary. And Saddam, with his hunger for power and his violent energy, was the perfect tool for them. He was still young, in his early 20s, but already full of fire, ambition, and dangerous confidence. This was the foundation of Saddam Hussein's future, a poor, unloved boy raised by extremists, abused, beaten, rejected, but with a growing belief that fear is strength and violence is the answer. He had not yet killed, he had not yet ruled, but the path was opening. And what came next would shake the entire country. Because now Saddam was ready to rise. In the late 1950s, Iraq was like a ticking bomb. The country was changing. The monarchy was collapsing. In 1958, the Iraqi king was overthrown and killed in a violent military revolution. The new government was military-based and claimed to support the people, but many Iraqis, especially Arab nationalists, were angry. They believed Iraq was still controlled by foreign influence, especially Britain and America. The Ba'ath Party, which Saddam had joined, believed that Iraq must be strong, independent, and united with other Arab countries. They believed that change would not come through peaceful discussion, but through violence and control. Saddam Hussein, still very young, was already a trusted member of the party. He was quiet, observant, but deeply loyal. He didn't speak too much, but when the moment came, he didn't hesitate to act. And now the Ba'ath Party was preparing for something big. The president at that time was General Abdul Karim Qasim. He had taken power after the king was removed. But many people in the Ba'ath Party saw him as a problem. They believed Qasim was too friendly with the communists. They feared he would destroy Arab unity and allow Soviet influence to grow stronger in Iraq. In 1959, Saddam Hussein was chosen for a dangerous mission to help assassinate the president. He was only 22 years old, but he agreed immediately. The plan was simple on paper, but extremely dangerous. Qasim would be traveling in his car, and Saddam's group would attack the vehicle with machine guns while it moved through a narrow Baghdad street. 7 men waited in hiding, their guns ready. Saddam was given a rifle and a pistol. The president's car arrived. Bullets filled the air. Saddam fired his weapon. Chaos exploded in seconds, but Qasim did not die. He was injured and his driver was killed. But somehow he escaped alive. The plan had failed, and now every man involved was wanted by the government. Saddam's face was soon on most wanted posters across Baghdad. He had to run. Saddam was injured in the leg during the shooting. He couldn't walk properly. But with help from the Ba'ath Party network, he managed to escape Baghdad. He walked through remote areas, hid in village homes, crossed rivers, and moved at night. Eventually, With help from supporters, he escaped to Syria and then later to Egypt, where the government supported Arab nationalists. In Cairo, Saddam lived under a false identity. He joined the University of Cairo's law school, though he never completed his studies. But more importantly, he stayed in touch with his party. He learned, he waited, he watched, and he planned. In 1963, the Ba'ath Party finally took power in Iraq through another military coup. Saddam returned to Baghdad with great hope. But the new Ba'ath government was unstable and short-lived. After only 9 months, they were removed from power by another group of army leaders. This meant that once again, Saddam was in danger. But this time, he did not run. He stayed underground. He worked quietly with other Baathists to organize, rebuild, and plan their next rise. He married his cousin Sajida and began raising a family, even as his political life became more dangerous. By this time, Saddam had become more than just a fighter. He had become a master planner. He was calm, intelligent, cold, and deeply focused. He began to understand how power works behind the scenes: information, loyalty, control, and fear. And soon his plans would become darker. In 1964, Saddam was finally captured by the Iraqi police. He was put in prison in Baghdad. But he didn't panic. Instead, he used this time to think, write, plan, and organize. After 2 years, in 1966, Saddam escaped from prison. But this was not just a lucky break. It was a planned escape with help from Ba'ath Party insiders. A car waited outside the prison. The guards were bribed or threatened. Saddam disappeared into the night. This escape made him famous inside the Ba'ath Party. He was now seen as someone who could lead, not just fight. And soon, that's exactly what he would do. In 1968, the Ba'ath Party took over Iraq again, this time with a much stronger foundation. Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, a senior Ba'athist, became president of Iraq. Saddam Hussein was made vice president. But in reality, he was becoming the most powerful man behind the scenes. He controlled the intelligence services, the secret police, and all the networks of information. He listened to people's conversations. He watched the army. He removed enemies silently. He built loyalty through fear. He rewarded those who obeyed. He punished those who resisted. He smiled in public and destroyed in private. By the early 1970s, Saddam was the shadow king of Iraq. Though he was not yet the president, many people knew he was the real power. He built torture chambers. He trained men in surveillance and interrogation. He created a system where no one felt safe because anyone could be watched, recorded, or punished. But at the same time, Saddam made moves to win public support. He nationalized the oil industry, bringing billions into Iraq. He invested in education and infrastructure. He built new cities, bridges, and schools. But these were not acts of kindness. They were acts of strategy. Because Saddam understood one thing clearly: to rule Iraq, he had to do 2 things at the same time: make the people love him and make them fear him even more. It was the 16th of July, 1979. President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, the man who had led Iraq for over a decade, announced his resignation. The reason he gave was poor health. But the real reason was hidden from the public. Over the years, Saddam had grown more powerful than the president himself. He had carefully placed his own loyal people in key positions: the army, the intelligence service, the media, and even inside al-Bakr's closest circle. One by one, Saddam had gained control, not by fighting in the streets, but by controlling minds and eliminating threats. The resignation was not a surprise to those inside the government. They had seen it coming. But they stayed silent because silence meant safety. The next day, Saddam Hussein became the president of Iraq, and everything changed. Just 2 weeks after becoming president, Saddam called a Ba'ath Party meeting in Baghdad. It was a large, open-air hall. Hundreds of party members were there. Men who had worked beside him, supported him, laughed with him, trusted him. Saddam walked onto the stage calmly. He sat down, and then he took out a list of names. He stood up and said that there was a conspiracy against the government. He said some party members were traitors who had been working with enemies of Iraq. He began reading names one by one. The room went silent. Some men fainted, others cried. Many just sat frozen in their seats. As each name was called, security guards pulled those men out of the hall. They were later executed, some immediately, some after confessions. In just one day, more than 60 top party members were removed. It was a message to everyone. No one is untouchable. Even those closest to him were not safe. Even friends could disappear. This moment marked the beginning of Saddam's true rule. It was not based on politics or popularity. It was based on one thing only: fear. After becoming president, Saddam focused on controlling the country from the inside. He expanded the Mukhabarat, the Iraqi intelligence agency. They tapped phone calls, they placed spies in schools, offices, mosques, and markets. Neighbors reported on neighbors. Children were trained to report on parents. One wrong word could lead to arrest. One rumor could mean death. People learned not to speak, not to question, not to even look nervous in public. Every classroom had Saddam's picture. Every newspaper praised him. Every TV channel showed his speeches. He became the face of Iraq, the voice of Iraq, the center of Iraq. And slowly, Iraq stopped being a country. It became a prison with flags. Saddam did not trust outsiders. So he built his circle of power using family members and people from Tikrit, his hometown. His sons, Uday and Qusay, were given special powers. His cousins and half-brothers were placed in military and intelligence positions. His tribe became Iraq's elite. He did this for one reason: loyalty. He believed that only blood could be trusted. But even inside his own family, fear remained. Anyone could be removed. Even relatives had to remain loyal. Not out of love, but out of fear of losing everything. For ordinary Iraqis, life under Saddam in the early 1980s was a mixture of progress and paranoia. He built modern highways, bridges, schools, and hospitals. He improved electricity and water systems. He gave money to families, especially in the cities. He offered free education and health care. But this was not because he loved the people. It was part of his control system. If people had jobs, services, and comfort, they would stay quiet. And those who did not stay quiet would vanish. Writers, artists, journalists, students, anyone who spoke against the government could be arrested without a warrant. Some were tortured, some were killed, some were simply never seen again. The streets were clean, the hospitals were running, but behind the walls, Iraq was bleeding. In 1980, Saddam made a dangerous decision. He ordered an invasion of Iran, starting the Iran-Iraq War, one of the longest and bloodiest wars of the 20th century. Why did he do it? He believed Iran was weak after its Islamic Revolution in 1979. He feared Iran's religious movement might spread into Iraq. He wanted to prove Iraq was the true leader of the Arab world. He thought he could win quickly, but he was wrong. The war lasted 8 years. From 1980 to 1988, over 1 million people died, soldiers and civilians. Both countries used brutal tactics, including chemical weapons, child soldiers, and mass executions. Iraq suffered deeply. Cities were bombed. The economy collapsed. Thousands of Iraqi families lost sons, fathers, and brothers. But Saddam refused to stop. He refused to lose. He believed that retreat was weakness. And even in the middle of this war, he continued building statues of himself, giving long speeches, and reminding the world that he was Iraq. While the country suffered, Saddam made sure no one talked about it. He created one version of reality and forced the media to repeat it. Iraq was winning. Saddam was a hero. The world was jealous of Iraq. Artists were forced to write poems about him. Songs were written with his name. Children were taught that Saddam was like a father to all Iraqis. It became illegal to criticize the president, even in private. And people learned to survive with one rule: don't speak. Part 2, The Storm Beyond the Borders. Now the war was over, but Saddam had a new problem. He had no money. The economy was collapsing. The people were tired. But more than anything, Saddam was angry because in his mind, Iraq had protected the Arab world from Iran's revolution. He believed Kuwait and Saudi Arabia should now forgive Iraq's debt or even reward Iraq. But instead, Kuwait refused to cancel the loan. And even worse, it began producing extra oil, which made oil prices fall. That meant Iraq was earning less money from oil exports, its biggest source of income. To Saddam, this was not just economic pressure. He saw it as an insult. He believed Kuwait was stealing oil from Iraq, from a shared oil field near the border. And his anger began to grow. At first, Saddam tried diplomacy. He met with Kuwaiti leaders. He warned them. He sent public statements saying Iraq would not stay silent. But behind the scenes, he was preparing for something much bigger. He moved troops closer to the Kuwait border. He held secret military meetings. He began training soldiers for a fast strike. He believed no one would stop him. And why would they? The U.S. had supported Iraq during the Iran War. Arab countries respected or feared him. And Kuwait had no real army to defend itself. So Saddam made a decision that would change the future of Iraq forever. In the early morning hours of August 2nd, Iraqi tanks, soldiers, and helicopters crossed the border into Kuwait. They moved quickly, more than 100,000 troops. In less than 48 hours, Kuwait was fully occupied. Its government had escaped, its capital was under control, and Saddam had declared Kuwait as part of Iraq, calling it Iraq's 19th province. He believed it was a victory. He believed the world would watch but stay silent. But this time, he was wrong. Within hours, the world's most powerful countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and others, condemned the invasion. The United Nations demanded Iraq leave Kuwait immediately, but Saddam refused. He made speeches calling it justice. He said Kuwait was created by the British and had always belonged to Iraq. He said Iraq was standing up against colonialism and Western control. But the world didn't accept his words. The United Nations passed economic sanctions, meaning Iraq could no longer sell oil or buy many foreign goods. Iraq's economy, already weak, began collapsing even faster. And then came a deadline. The United Nations gave Iraq until January 15, 1991, to leave Kuwait. If Saddam did not withdraw, there would be military action. Still, he refused. On January 17, 1991, just 2 days after the deadline, the U.S. and its allies began Operation Desert Storm. For 5 weeks, they launched airstrikes over Iraq and Kuwait, airports, military bases, factories, communication lines, everything was targeted. Iraq's military power was crushed from the sky. And then, on February 24th, a ground invasion began. In just 100 hours, the coalition forces led by the U.S. pushed Iraqi troops out of Kuwait. The war officially ended on February 28, 1991. Iraq had lost. But Saddam, he was still in power. His palaces were still untouched. He appeared on television smiling, calling it a spiritual victory. But the truth was very different. The internal collapse. After the war, Iraq was in crisis. Its infrastructure was destroyed. Its economy was frozen. Its people were starving. And inside Iraq, something new began to rise. Rebellion. In the south, the Shia Muslims, long oppressed by Saddam's regime, began protesting. In the north, the Kurdish population also rose up, hoping the U.S. would help them. But the U.S. did not intervene inside Iraq. They had stopped at the border. They had only wanted to free Kuwait, not remove Saddam. This gave Saddam time and power to crush the uprisings. He used the army, tanks, and air force to attack the rebels. Thousands were killed. Entire villages were destroyed. People fled to the mountains, to borders, to refugee camps. Saddam was now focused on controlling the inside once again, using brutality, surveillance, and silence. With international sanctions still in place, Iraq could not sell oil freely. So in 1995, the United Nations started the Oil for Food program. It allowed Iraq to sell limited oil and use the money for food and medicine only, not weapons. But even this program became corrupt. Reports later showed that billions of dollars were stolen, and people close to Saddam used the system for profit. Meanwhile, ordinary Iraqis suffered. Children died from hunger and medicine shortages. Hospitals ran out of equipment. Malnutrition spread in villages and cities. But Saddam's rule remained strong. Not because of support, but because of fear and exhaustion. People were too tired to fight, and those who tried were silenced quickly. As Iraq became weaker, Saddam tried to make his image stronger. He built larger statues. He had songs written about him. His face was printed on money, books, stamps, and buildings. Every speech called him the leader of all Arabs, the Lion of Babylon, or the father of the nation. But these titles were not love. They were orders. People repeated them not from pride, but from fear. He trusted almost no one. He moved between dozens of secret palaces, fearing assassination. And still he watched the West. Still he spoke in public, warning his enemies. Still he believed Iraq could rise again. But the world had not forgotten about him, and his next move would bring his final enemy closer than ever. Part 3. The World Returns. The Road to War. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the world stopped. 4 airplanes were hijacked by a terrorist group called Al-Qaeda. 2 were flown into the World Trade Center towers in New York City. 1 hit the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and another crashed in a field. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in one day. It was one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in modern history. The world was in shock, and the United States was angry. President George W. Bush made a clear statement. "We will fight terrorism everywhere. We will not wait for threats to come to us." Now, Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. The attackers were from Al-Qaeda, mostly from Saudi Arabia. But after the attacks, the U.S. government began looking at all countries that were considered dangerous or untrustworthy. And Iraq under Saddam Hussein was at the top of that list. Why? Because the U.S. believed Saddam was hiding weapons of mass destruction, also called WMDs. These are weapons that can kill thousands or millions of people, like nuclear bombs, chemical gas, or biological weapons. Saddam had used chemical weapons in the past, during the Iran War and against Kurds in northern Iraq. So many believed he still had more. The U.S. also believed that Saddam might one day give those weapons to terrorists. And that fear created one message: we cannot wait. Between 1991 and 1998, UN weapons inspectors had been visiting Iraq regularly. Their job was to search for nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. They destroyed many old weapons. They closed many programs. But they also reported that Iraq was not fully cooperating. In 1998, Saddam ended the cooperation completely. He stopped allowing inspectors into Iraq. To the world, this raised a question. What was he hiding? Years passed. Then, in 2002, under global pressure, Saddam finally allowed inspectors back in. They searched again, but could not find any weapons of mass destruction. Still, the U.S. government did not believe it. They said Saddam had hidden the weapons. He was moving them secretly. He was playing a game with the world. And they made a decision. In early 2003, the U.S. and the United Kingdom began preparing for war. They tried to get full support from the United Nations, but some countries like France, Germany, and Russia did not agree. They said there was no clear proof of weapons. They warned that an invasion would be dangerous. But the U.S. continued. President Bush said Iraq had violated UN resolutions and Saddam was a threat to peace. He gave Saddam one last warning: leave Iraq in 48 hours or face war. Saddam refused. He appeared on Iraqi television dressed in military uniform. He said Iraq would never surrender. He warned that Iraq would defend itself. He called the coming war unjust. And then it began. In the early hours of March 20th, U.S. and coalition forces launched Operation Iraqi Freedom. The sky over Baghdad lit up with explosions, rockets, and airstrikes. The campaign began with a powerful move called shock and awe. It was designed to surprise, confuse, and destroy key Iraqi military targets quickly. Day and night, bombs dropped across Iraq. Military bases, government buildings, communication centers, roads, and bridges. Within days, U.S. ground troops began moving in from the south through Kuwait. British forces joined from the east. Air support came from ships, drones, and jets. Iraqi soldiers fought in some areas, but in many places they surrendered quickly. The Iraqi army was underprepared and overwhelmed. Saddam's control began falling fast. Just 3 weeks after the invasion began, the U.S. military entered the capital city, Baghdad. Iraqi forces had mostly disappeared. And then, a moment the world watched on live television. A massive statue of Saddam Hussein standing in Firdos Square was pulled down by a U.S. tank and a group of cheering Iraqis. The statue hit the ground. People hit it with shoes, sticks, and sandals. Cameras captured it all. It became the symbol of the fall of Saddam's rule. But something was still missing. Where was Saddam Hussein? As the cities fell, as palaces were captured, as ministries were taken, Saddam had vanished. He had not been seen on live TV. He had not been captured. His voice was no longer on radio. Even his closest advisors didn't know where he was. The U.S. created a most wanted list with Saddam's face at the top. They searched cities, tunnels, farms, deserts. Still no sign. Rumors spread. He was hiding in Tikrit. He had escaped to Syria. He was dead. He was underground preparing to fight back. But no one knew the truth. Saddam Hussein had disappeared, and Iraq had entered a new kind of chaos. The fall of Saddam's government did not bring peace. In fact, Iraq quickly fell into violence. Looting began across cities. Military bases were empty and full of weapons, now in the hands of civilians. Old political groups and religious tensions returned to the surface. The Sunni and Shia populations began fighting. Terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda, entered Iraq. Bombings, killings, and kidnappings became daily news. Many Iraqis had hated Saddam, but now they were afraid of something worse: total chaos. The people who once feared silence now feared the sound of explosions. And the world was asking a question: was removing Saddam Hussein the beginning of freedom, or the beginning of something darker? Part 4. The Fall of a Shadow. For 8 months, Saddam Hussein had disappeared. The statue in Baghdad had fallen. The palaces were taken. The military was broken. The cities were filled with smoke, noise, and fear. But the man who had ruled Iraq with absolute control for over 2 decades was nowhere to be found. He had once filled every street with his image. Now his face was only on the most wanted posters created by the U.S. military. And at the top of that list, Saddam's name was marked as the Ace of Spades. The U.S. launched a massive operation across Iraq. Thousands of troops searched houses, farms, bunkers, tunnels, and mountains. They arrested former generals, bodyguards, and family members, hoping someone would speak. Some of Saddam's close men had escaped. Others were killed. Many were hiding. But still, no one knew where Saddam was. In the city of Tikrit, his hometown, hundreds of homes were searched. His cousins were tracked. Dozens of small tips were investigated. But again and again, they found nothing. It was as if he had vanished into dust. After 8 months, a new tip came in, a very specific one. U.S. intelligence believed Saddam was hiding near Tikrit in a remote farming area called Ad-Dar. 2 small villages were marked, Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. More than 600 soldiers from the U.S. 4th Infantry Division and Special Forces were sent in. The mission was called Operation Red Dawn. They searched 2 farmhouses. And near one of them, they found something strange: a small hidden opening in the ground. It was covered with bricks and dirt. A soldier removed the cover. Beneath it, a dark hole. They shined a flashlight, and inside that narrow space was Saddam Hussein. He was dirty, tired, and silent. He had a long gray beard. His hair was messy. He carried no weapons. In that moment, he said just one sentence in English: "I am Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq. I want to negotiate." But there was no negotiation. He was taken by helicopter. Photographs were taken to confirm his identity. A medical check was done. He was alive. He was captured. And the news spread across the world in seconds. Iraqis ran to the streets. Some celebrated. Some cried. Some stayed quiet, unsure what this meant for the future. The man who had once ruled with fear was now a prisoner in a hole. After his capture, Saddam was taken to a secret location. The U.S. handed him over to the Iraqi interim government, but under close watch. In 2005, he was put on trial. This was not just a court case. It was history. The charges were many, but the first and main trial focused on the 1982 killings in Dujail, a town where more than 140 people were executed after a failed attack on Saddam's convoy. The trial lasted months. It was shown on television. Iraqis watched as Saddam sat in court, sometimes shouting, sometimes silent. He argued with judges. He denied guilt. He said the court was illegal. He refused to say he was wrong. But the court continued. Witnesses came forward, documents were shown, evidence was presented. On November 5, 2006, the verdict was given. Saddam Hussein was found guilty of crimes against humanity. The punishment? Death by hanging. Many Iraqis celebrated the decision. Some said justice was finally served. Others feared it would bring more violence. But the sentence was clear, and the date was set. It was the morning of Eid al-Adha, a major Islamic festival. While most people in Iraq prepared for prayer and celebration, Saddam was taken from his cell. He wore a dark coat over a white shirt. He was calm. He walked slowly. He was taken to a small room in a building once used by his own intelligence services. A few officials were present. A video camera recorded everything. He was offered a hood. He refused. The noose was placed around his neck. A few people exchanged words. There were no last-minute delays. And then it was done. Saddam Hussein was executed by hanging. His body was later taken to Al-Alja, his birthplace, and buried near a family tomb. The man who had ruled Iraq with iron for 24 years was now gone. But Iraq did not find peace. In the years after his death, civil war, terrorism, and foreign occupation continued. The group ISIS rose from the ashes of old extremist movements. Sectarian violence grew. Car bombs, kidnappings, and street wars became common. Some Iraqis said Saddam's removal brought freedom. Others said it opened the gates to endless bloodshed. Even today, Iraq continues to carry the pain, the questions, and the scars of that era. Saddam Hussein's story is not just the story of one man. It is the story of a child who grew up in fear. A young man who chose control over kindness. A leader who built a system with silence, fear, and strength. And a country that followed him, resisted him, feared him, and survived him. His story shows how power can rise and how it can fall, how one decision can lead to war, and how one voice can shape or silence millions. This was not a fairy tale. This was real. This was history. Now that the story is complete, let's stop and ask, what do we learn? 1. Power built on fear does not last forever. Fear can control people, but it cannot build peace. 2. Silence is not always safety. In many places, people stay silent to survive. But silence also allows cruelty to grow. 3. History must be remembered, not repeated. Stories like this must be studied, not ignored, so we can protect the future. 4. Every choice matters. One leader's choices affected millions. That is the weight of leadership and the danger of ego. This video is not meant to praise or blame anyone. This is not about politics. This is not about religion. This is not about hate. This video is about education, understanding, and learning through real stories. Every fact in this story was carefully researched. Every moment was written to help you understand history in simple English so that you can learn language, life, and leadership through the truth. Please remember, this is an educational story. It is not made to support or attack anyone. If you found this video powerful, informative, and eye-opening, please share it. And if you want to learn more stories like this, subscribe to our channel. Because here we tell the world's most powerful stories in a way that helps you learn, grow, and think. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay strong, and keep learning.